went before pick 25. Here's a warning from Louis Riddick about passing on Sanders.
All the teams that are passing on him right now, as Mel just mentioned, are taking a gamble. They're taking a gamble. The teams who need a quarterback, and if you pass on him and he winds up having a Drew Brees type of career, a Tom Brady type of career, which he's totally capable of, you're going to sit back and there's going to be a lot of revisionist history on here. I get that. There's going to be a lot of case studies done on why did people pass on him? Was it because they thought he was cocky? Was it because of his death? Was it because he was a drag? All the other nonsense that you hear. So if it isn't because of how he plays the game, I agree with you.
Strong sound right there. Marcus, why did Shedeur not get drafted in the first round?
Because 32 teams didn't think he was good enough to get drafted in the first round. And some teams didn't need a quarterback. Some teams thought other positions were more valuable. And I get, here's the thing, and I said this earlier today, man. I get everybody, because we've talked about Shedeur Sanders ad nauseum for the last 3 years when him and Prime and Travis Hunter showed up to Jackson State. We talked about the tandem. He coaching his father, Shedeur. They transfer and they go to Colorado, and Shedeur plays well. They win the TCU game. Everybody going crazy. They make Colorado relevant. All of those things have transpired all the way up until this point where we get to the draft. And when you start evaluating and teams look at this, and let me say this, the media didn't have one pick in the first round last night. Nobody called us to ask us, should they take Shedeur or should they take Cam Ward or should they trade up to get Travis Hunter? Nobody did that. These teams looked at it and they said, we don't feel like the value is there to take Shedeur Sanders in the first round. There was a team that traded up in the New York Giants that didn't feel like he was good enough for them to take him with the 26th pick. So that's that in that scenario. Here's the other thing. When you start thinking about and this is why sports is so great. As much as we could want to see it for him, and teams have I'm sure teams have come back and said, I regretted not taking this guy. You think Chicago ain't say it after they've seen what Patrick Mahomes has done? You don't think the Giants regret after, even though it might have not made a difference in the championship, what they saw Saquon Barkley do in Philly? So I understand it. This is prime-time Deion Sanders' son, who played the position really, really good for the Colorado Buffaloes. They won more games, brought more attention, more eyes were focused. But when 32 teams last night were on the clock, and the teams that needed a quarterback were on the clock, they did not think Shedeur Sanders at that point, which I think he'll get drafted tonight or even in the third round, had enough value for them to use that pick to pick him. That's all it boils down to. Now, we can get into the game and why we think these things happen, but that's ultimately what we watched transpire last night.
2 words, evaluation and projection. And that's what the first round is about. And so, Marcus, you heard me say, Stephen A. Malik, one, can we stop having the funeral for Shedeur right now? Can we stop? He didn't get drafted in the first round. He very well might get drafted in the first 5 picks tonight. And candidly, it could be a better situation for him. So it's not the end of his story. Marcus and I were watching the draft last night with MK and a couple other people, and we're sitting there, and the reality set in of it did kind of stink, because what should be a celebratory story and really cool and inspiring story has turned into this negative narrative and this somber thing. And I'm sure there's a downtrodden feeling about it in the Sanders family. I'm sure it is, because it is a great story. The journey of him and his dad together, it is, and hopefully tonight they'll get to celebrate that, okay? I'm going to keep it on the field, just as the player and the tape. Years ago, Joe Burrow's last year at LSU, before the season started, there's no way anybody said Joe Burrow was going to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft 6 months after the season. But the evaluation process and the play that year led to that. Last year, before the college football season in 2023, no one was saying that Jaden Daniels was going to be the 2nd pick of the NFL draft before that year that he had at LSU. But the tape that year and the evaluation process brought him to that. Cam Ward was not the number 1 pick in September, but the tape and then the evaluation process led to that. And so when you
Yeah, that was actually like a pretty, again, no. It was a terrible letter. It was a terrible letter. But it's that, like, I finally, like, wrote a letter, I guess. But I don't know how to write a story. But I would just write a story that happened. And again, I would tell that story over and over again. Like, what, yeah, bro, who am I? Where am I from? And, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, all this stuff. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to do with the letters, though. And I'm obviously starting with all these people, son. Because I'm like, yeah, bro, like, what's my side of the story, son? Because this, yeah, that's the letter. Okay.
Of every element in this list multiplied by 2. Now's a good time to try. Once you've done that, I also recommend looking at the original copy demo list. Note that this is unaltered. Map actually returned a new data structure that represents performing this function on this list. This becomes important later when I explain aliasing, but I will do that in about 2 minutes. If we want to get even more elegant, we can use list comprehensions. List comprehensions, if you ask somebody where list comprehensions are from, they'll probably say Haskell, because that is the most popular use of list comprehensions in terms of like pure lazy functional programming. But it actually goes back further than that and is in Smalltalk and then something from the 60s. I can't remember the name of it
Today,
right now.
teens can download any app from app stores,
They're really
even
nice
ones
because
parents don't want them to.
they
When you're struggling
borrow
with opioid use, life can feel overwhelming.
they
A battle
borrow
where every move counts. Each move
syntactic
crucial to a successful strategy.
they borrow syntactic approach
It's
from
all
that
about
to me.
progress.
This looks a
Claiming
lot like Setner.
victories.
And when you read this, you can probably tell that the list comprehension is going to describe a set